Hello, Hayes. People in my life are ramping up their baby questions, like when and if my husband and I are having kids, and it's really starting to bother me. I'm 33, and I expect these questions from his family and my dad. For context, my mom died almost a year ago after a years long battle with cancer. When they ask these questions, I usually wave them off and say, not yet, which is true. We do plan to have a child, just not right now. What's really upsetting me are the questions from my friends. One told me not to wait too long, which I know is because she just had her first child and doesn't want to be alone in early parenthood. Another reads into everything I say and post like it's a secret pregnancy hint. When I asked her to stop, she half apologized, but said she makes these jokes to other friends with no problem. And then she got so upset that she hurt me that I was forced to comfort her. I can keep it together when it's my family, but I expect more from my friends, who I thought would know better than to act this way. I know I can't control other people, and this won't be the first or last time I get these questions from people in my life. But my emotional reactions feel disproportionate to the questions themselves. I get extremely frustrated and have to stop myself from going off on whatever friend asks me about it, even if it's well-intentioned. So how do I respond in a way that doesn't lose it on them, but also helps them understand that generally it's not appropriate to ask any woman such questions, because there are so many things they could be struggling with behind the scenes? Yours, feeling pressured and pissed. I mean, first off, I understand feeling both pressured and feeling pissed. Okay. We're gonna have this conversation as if I'm having this conversation, the same type of conversation with a friend, which is how I approach most of these advice letter experiences. But I'm saying that now both to ground me and to ground you, because I do think that this is this is an emotional topic. It's an emotional topic, and I have lots of strong emotions about it, and many of my strong emotions have shifted over the course of the last probably couple of years. And frankly, they shift. I could write this letter. I could write this letter sometimes. Sometimes I'm in the headspace where you are me, feeling pressured and pissed. And sometimes I'm not. And sometimes it's 2 days apart, one person could ask me this question, and because of who they are and the way they asked it, I would feel exponentially more pissed off than if it was someone else. So it's a complicated topic, and I just want to kind of ground us in that, ground me in that. I want to ground me in that. So, I do think that there is a wrong way, an inconsiderate way, an ineffective way, ignorant way to ask people about whether or not they want to have kids. There's a wrong way to have this conversation with someone, with anybody. And it sounds like it does sound like the two examples you give. Don't wait too long, and then the other person constantly guessing if you're having a kid or not. Those do sound like obnoxious examples. They do. So I understand getting annoyed at that. I think there's a wrong way. And I think that once we have it in our head that this is an off-limits topic, or this is something we don't want to talk about, or this is something that I get upset about, sometimes we can it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and no matter what somebody says, we interpret it the wrong way. I think both of those things are true. I get the sense, based on the fact that you said that you recognize that these reactions are disproportionate. I feel like you're coming to me because you want to better manage your reaction for you, which is, I think, a really important thing to do, because you're right. People are going to keep asking you people are going to bring up the topic of children, and it's going to be exhausting for your nervous system if every time it comes up, you're having this internal explosion that you're trying to keep at bay. I don't want that for you. You don't want that for you. I don't want that for me. Okay, so where should we really dig in here? I think maybe we should talk about the difference between an invasive way to have this conversation and a curious way. I think what upsets me, well, one, the truth is just that there's some people in your life that no matter what they say, you don't want to have this conversation with them. So no matter how they address it or how they bring it up, it's going to piss you off. I kind of I'm like surprised that you don't mind the question coming from family. I feel like I just find that so interesting that the friends are what's pissing you off more than the family members. Because sometimes like family members could be the ones who have, quote, a stake in it. And I shouldn't even say quote. Part of me, I'm saying that because like a lot of people feel pressured to have children because of their parents, right? They want to make their parents grandparents. And I'm not sure that's a good enough reason to have kids if you don't want them, just to make your parents grandparents, unless those grandparents are going to be like so very involved. So part of me is like, why do you have a say? Like, it's not your child. But I think it's also dismissive to a parent's experience. Like, they may have dreamt up what it could be like to be a grandparent. So I don't want to like completely shit on. It's not completely fair to say that you don't have legs to stand on and being upset about this because it's not going to be your baby. But like wanting to be a grandparent is a very real thing. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent now. I just find it so interesting that it's your friends specifically that are pissing you off about this. And that you're able to tap into that like disconnected state. Because I do think the fact that you're able to kind of wave your hand, roll your eyes, and dismiss them without the question like seeping into you is interesting. You have some armor up there where it's not so personal, maybe it's not so serious, it's annoying, but you don't really give a shit. The fact that you're not able to do that with your friends, or maybe you're less interested in doing that with your friends, I wonder what that's about. Like, you said that you expect more from them, and I wonder if part of why this is so hard is because you want to feel seen by your friends. And the fact that your friends can't communicate with you or aren't communicating with you about this thing that's going on for you, this thing that's in your life, this thing that you have, really dynamic and complicated and interesting and nuanced feelings about, that could be really disappointing. But I feel like I'm actually putting some words in your mouth about your feelings about having a child. You don't really talk about in your letter why this bothers you and what your feelings are about having a kid. I'll tell you what mine are. My complicated feelings. The times where I'll tell you what my feelings are, but also like the times when conversations feel hard. Sometimes conversations about deep topics with other people feel hard to me because I don't think the other person can understand what I'm saying. Sometimes I have not given them a chance, and it's like a protective thing that I've done where I'm like, nobody understands this, nobody will ever understand me, so I'm not even going to try. And other times this person has shown me that they don't understand. Other times they've shown me that. But I think it can feel hard to have such a deep conversation with someone. Like, my feelings about becoming a mom are very complicated, and they're not. It's like they're very complicated because they're not simple. And I think maybe we think that we feel like there's only two choices. It's like you either know for sure and you've never had any questions about it, or something else. And when I get into like the nitty gritty of where my confusing feelings about wanting to become a mom come from, like it's really simple to me. Like it's like, of course I feel this way. My feelings about becoming a parent are very connected to my own experiences of being a child, my own experiences with my parents, and my own experiences navigating my own really big, intense feelings. And all of those things together have informed the uncertainty, the fears that I have about being a mom. And the truth is that not everybody... It is really simple. Those things are really simple once I identified them. And some people in my life will, if they can't like understand and empathize, and if they don't know what that feels like some people can appreciate what it feels like for me, and they can be curious about it, and they can say that makes so much sense. I'm here to listen. But other people, like actually can't relate and may not have the emotional maturity or curiosity to engage in that conversation with me, so we don't. And the times I felt most triggered by questions about like this topic when I didn't have clarity myself on where my mixed feelings came from. And then when the people that were asking me about it, like, assumed they knew why. Like, I feel like most people assume, well, actually, I'm not going to say I feel like most people, because then I'm going like making an assumption. Most commonly when I'm talking with someone about conflicted feelings about kids, and sometimes I don't want to get into like I don't want to get into my full, like, even what I just said to you is like such a top line summary, right? What I just said to you is not like, I haven't finished working through what I'm feeling. So I'm not going to say it here. And I don't even say it in I say it in some of my friendships and in some of my intimate conversations, but a lot of it is still just like working it out personally. So sometimes I'll be talking with a person and I'm very comfortable saying now, I'm not sure. Like, I don't feel bad saying that. I don't feel triggered saying that. But sometimes people will like assume that I'm not sure because of like not wanting to give up my life. Like, that's a common reason in my circle, at least, where ambivalence comes from. It's the most commonly discussed. Like, oh, I'm not sure about becoming a mom because there's so much more I want to do. And like, do I want to open my life up in that way? Like, do I want to be responsible? Because sometimes people will say to me like, oh, I felt that way too, but my life just opened up after. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that's wonderful, and that's not really where my issue comes from. And I don't know, it can feel, if you have no one in your life who sort of can see your truth and like can really see and understand your complicated relationship to becoming a parent, that can feel really disappointing, isolating, etc. And sometimes if you are really stuck in your own, nobody will understand me, then nobody could say the right thing. Nobody could ask the right question. There's nothing they could say that would feel right because you have it in your head that like no one understands and everyone's going to say the wrong thing, and then therefore they do. But because like, if we talk about these specific examples, and obviously these are two examples that you chose. There could be more, these could be whatever. They're the two examples you chose. One friend told me not to wait too long, and she just had her first kid. Like, that weird thing to say, potentially offensive thing to say, inconsiderate thing to say, because to your point, maybe you're having infertility challenges and maybe you've been trying for a year, and like how hurtful that would be, how truly just mindless that would be to say to somebody. And if she thinks you want to have kids and you two are close, I can see how a friend could say to another friend, like, hurry up so we can do this together. And you could take that with a grain of salt. And just as you said, like, it's because she's doesn't want to do parenthood alone. That is actually a valid, it doesn't make it less self-absorbed to say, and it doesn't make it less annoying to say, but what am I trying to articulate here? You could just choose to be like, she said that because she wants to connect, and she's feeling lonely. You could choose to truly just see it that way and not see it in the annoying way. And I'm not telling you that that's how you should have reacted, but for some friends and in some situations, and maybe when we are really confident in our choice, or when we're not going through something hard, we do grant our friends flexibility, and we do grant our loved ones more flexibility in the words they choose. The friend who's always acting like a secret pregnancy hint, and then you told her how she made you feel and she half apologized, made it about her. I mean, that's like annoying behavior. That is annoying behavior. I can totally see why that irritated you. She should have just stopped. I can't really like fathom how people like push back after being told that something they're doing. If someone said to me like, hey, will you stop making comments about that? Or like, please stop asking me about that right now. It's hard to talk about. I can't imagine saying anything other than like, I'm sorry. Thank you for telling me. It won't happen again. I can't really imagine that. So that is really frustrating to me. And I think you have every right to then want to consider how you engage with this person moving forward. But again, it's not even about those friends. It's about how to react to this better. And better in quotes, because how to react to this in a way that serves your goal, how to react to this in a way that preserves your friendships, preserves your sanity, and makes it a little less emotional for you. But not to say that this is just an emotional reaction. I think it's sort of hard to, I also don't want to dissuade anyone from like having a cause that they care about, that they want to like wave the flag about. I think it's a great thing to have something that you're passionate about, that when it comes up in conversation, you're like ready to respectfully debate, or you're ready to share your perspective. You're ready to speak up. Like, we need voices like that who are brave, even when people around them don't agree or don't share the same perspective. Like, there's a time and a place for that, and it's so important. And it's hard to like separate the personal and the political from this. And you in your letter are talking about how you want to respond in a calm way that doesn't like, where you don't lose your shit, but you also want them to know that it's not appropriate to ask any woman this question because you don't know what she's going through. And I kind of feel like they're two separate conversations, because I ultimately don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with you should never ask a woman about parenthood, motherhood as a topic. I do think, as I said in the beginning, that there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. But I worry that if we're like, you should never ask a woman about it because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, that puts what's happening behind the scenes in an even more isolated bubble. When women who are dealing with infertility, miscarriage, those are the only two things that are coming top of mind right now, but there are so many more things that can come up in getting pregnant, and I'm feeling badly that I'm not able to draw them to the top of my head right now. Perhaps surrogacy, adoption, maybe your male partner is having an issue. Maybe that's covered under infertility. Shows how much I know. There's actually like, it's sort of embarrassing how little I know about the ins and outs of actually getting pregnant as like a 32-year-old woman, but that's a conversation for another time. I don't know if we shouldn't. If we don't ask, and we stand on the pedestal of you should never ask this, I worry that it takes a private conversation into like a secret conversation, and like a hidden secret thing that can be even more enveloped in shame. And I don't want that. I don't want a world where we're scared to ask each other personal things. Like, we want to bring these personal things to the forefront in our safe relationship so that we don't have to hold on to the shame. So I think like, it's not kind to ask a question like, so when are you having kids? That's a bad version of the question, because one, it assumes that you want to, it assumes that you're able to, and it doesn't leave room for the person you're asking to like share the truth of their experience. If you phrase the question though in more of an open, curious way, such as, what are your thoughts on having kids? Where are you on the no kids journey? Have you ever thought about, I'm going to say, have you ever thought about having kids? Maybe that could even be tricky. But I think there is a way to ask the question that invites conversation that is needed. And unfortunately, maybe it's not unfortunate, we all have to get better at dealing with triggers, but like, in the process of on the journey to having more of these taboo topics being discussed among friends, on that journey, if what we want is for them to be less taboo and more experiences to be accepted and understood and celebrated, we're going to have we're going to have mistakes along the way. So, some of the meaningful conversations I've had with people in my life about having kids, about, I don't know, deep, complicated stuff. When I've walked away from those conversations like, wow, that was really meaningful, the kickoff of the conversation might not have been perfect. Maybe they asked me a question that was kind of limiting. Maybe they said, are you and Brian Have you and Brian started trying having kids? Or are you and Brian, like, when are you going to do it? What's your timing? Maybe that would be on the more insensitive, I guess, range of the spectrum. I've had, if I respond to them in an open way, and then they respond to me in an open, curious way, then that creates an open, curious conversation. But it doesn't always start off perfectly, is what I'm trying to say. Like, a meaningful conversation is more of a long dance. Like, it doesn't need to, your first two steps don't need to be perfect. And I wonder if you have people in your life who are asking the question wrong at first, maybe try giving them a chance instead of just trying to teach them why that question was wrong. Try to respond to it in a way almost like reverse engineering the question. Like, respond to the question as if it was asked the way you want. So if someone says, when are you and Brian having kids? Instead of getting pissed off about that, which I'd have every right to be pissed off, and I'd have every right to respond in a similar fashion, I could pretend they asked me, what are your and Brian's thoughts about children? Have you ever thought about it? I can respond in that way. I could say, oh, it's like such an interesting question, actually. For a long time, I never even thought about it. I just assumed it would be a yes. And then as I got closer to the age where it would be appropriate for me, I started to feel more confused. And then over the last year or two, actually, as I've really thought about it more and thought, what's the source of this ambivalence? I've realized a couple of things that have made me feel more open to it. And it's actually been quite a journey. I could say something like that and then see how they respond. Again, the disappointing thing might be that they still don't fucking respond to you in a way that you want. And then maybe you try again, maybe you do it again. And if over time, this person, if you realize that we just are not on the same wavelength, we can't connect. You're not curious about my experiences and I'm not curious about yours then. Like, our perspectives just are not meshing. And then you might say, okay, this person is not going to be a person I try to talk about this with. And if they ask me a question about it again, I'll resort to one of my old faithful, like, not yet, we'll see. You can always bring out some of those quick responses that, I don't know, it's good to have those in your back pocket. To go back to the point about wanting to teach them a lesson, essentially, like, it's not appropriate to ask women these questions. I think that sometimes not everyone's going to learn this way, but we can also teach people things by modeling our open, flexible perspective. Sometimes you don't need to hit someone over the head with hey, other people are going through something different than you are, and therefore don't ask this type of question. You can start by modeling, by answering the question with your perspective. That's clearly different from what they were assuming. You are kind of teaching them that other people have different perspectives. Maybe give them the benefit of the doubt that they can infer then that, oh, my question actually was kind of limiting. Now, not everybody's that smart. Not everybody's that emotionally intelligent. Not everybody's going to pick up on that. I'm sorry, they're not. Does that mean of me to call them not smart? I mean, I'm not calling them another name. Not everyone's going to pick up on that. And then maybe there are more direct conversations where you say, you asked me this question the other day, or that question actually doesn't feel good because I feel like there's an assumption baked into it that I'm going to have kids. And for me, it's more complicated. And for a lot of my friends, it's more complicated. And I wonder, it would feel better if you asked it like this, because less about the specific words you're using, but it would be better if you approach this conversation with some curiosity. That might feel really awkward to say to somebody, but what's the point I'm trying to make? I think sometimes starting out soft by just modeling what you want to see can teach people a lesson. But I also, if this is a cause that you want to you want to advocate for, you want to advocate for how we talk about motherhood and fertility and all of that, it could be something that you bring up separately from when you're being triggered. Because I don't know if we are, and look, some people are excellent debaters and can really prove a point. when they are triggered. And maybe actually they're not triggered. Maybe that's why they're able to effectively do it. But I'm not sure you're ever going to achieve your goal of like wanting people to be more sensitive if you're only bringing that up and you're bringing up that argument and that point when you yourself are angry, pissed off, pressured, flustered. I don't know if you're going to be able to communicate and articulate your thoughts so well. It might be a conversation that you bring up with those people later over drinks without calling them out for the question that they asked you once. It could just be in the same way like friends give each other updates. You can randomly be like, I've been like really passionate lately about being child free and like the process of deciding whether I want to have kids. And it's made me think about all of the conversations I've had and that I've been a part of too that weren't that inclusive. And you could bring it up almost as like a hobby or an interest. I am curious where I think it's worth also thinking more for you about where the frustration is coming from. Is the frustration just coming from like, wanting to speak on behalf women who have been silenced in the past or women who have been going through infertility for a specific example and have been asked these insensitive questions? Like, are you just wanting to kind of speak for the voiceless? It's worth you asking yourself, why is this so upsetting for me right now? And, you mentioned your mom died almost a year ago. I'm so sorry. It would make sense to me if you know that you've always wanted a kid. And even if, I feel like, even if not, I imagine you thought about your mom as a grandparent. I imagine that that was an image you had at one point, and now that image is no longer. So even if you know you want to have a kid, parts of your motherhood journey are, colored by grief. And that's the hard thing about grief, is that with the joy and all of the future joy you will have in your life, there will also be that pain. And that fucking sucks. And I wonder if right now, especially with this loss being, especially with the loss being fresh is what I was going to say, but the loss is going to continue, the loss will continue forever. But with this, your mom it hasn't even been a year. It must be hard to talk about parenthood without also having her in that conversation. And if your friends aren't bringing kind of that knowledge or that sympathy, that layer to the conversation, yeah, it would feel isolating and like you don't even know me. How could we even be talking about this without also talking about my mom, which maybe you don't even want to talk about your mom. But sometimes even when we don't want to talk about something, we like don't want to talk about the larger, like maybe you don't want to talk about your mom and you don't want to talk about your grief. But because of that, you actually don't even want to talk about becoming a parent at all because you can't separate the two, but you don't want to talk about how you can't separate the two. I'm speaking to you pressured and pissed, but like take yourself out of that example a little bit. If you can, do you guys know what I'm trying to say? Like sometimes we just don't want to go anywhere near the topic. So we kind of silence it all, But I think that you should spend some time sitting with this. Like, why is it so irritating to me right now? Why is this so triggering? For me, at least, really digging into because I don't know if I was ever so triggered by the questions, but I was consumed by the uncertainty. And as I've really dug into that uncertainty more, I feel like a little bit more at peace. I don't feel like I have a decision, and I don't feel like I don't know if I have like every little thing sorted out, but I feel more at peace and I have more understanding of my own thought process, which makes me more compassionate when I talk about it with others. And I reserve the right, just as you reserve the right, to not get into it with people, even with people you love. I've had experiences recently where people ask me about it, and I don't want to get into the whole thing right now. So I just sort of ask them questions and I listen and I say I'm feeling better about it and I'm feeling more open, and I don't need to get into the whole history of it, every little thing I've learned, because that's still private. It's still something I'm dealing with, but I can appreciate, there's like layers Vulnerability with friends, there's like, it's like an onion, okay? There's like layers to the conversation. And, I can peel back a couple of layers without going all the way to the pit. The pit right now is for me. Do onions have pits? They don't have pits. The core, I don't know what it is. Is there anything else that I want to say to you? I mean, there's so much more we can say about this conversation. Interestingly, I recently actually was asked, I was with a bunch of women who were probably in their like, let's say their mid 60s. And one of them I hadn't met before, and Brian was with me. And she said, "How old are you guys?" And I said, "I'm 32. And she said, "Are you having kids?" Did you say, "Are you having kids?" Yeah, she said, "Are you having kids? Do you have kids?" I said, "No." And she said, "Are you having them?" It was some kind of thing like that. And I said, "No." And then I directed the question back to her. "No, do you have kids?" And I'll tell you, my assumptions were challenged because she didn't. She didn't have kids. She had stepkids, but she doesn't have, she framed it as no, but I have 10, 10, it probably wasn't 10. I have X example amount of stepchildren. And my assumption was challenged because I thought she was asking me that because she was going to tell me about how she recently became a grandmother and how amazing it is to have children, which I'm sure that's all true, but it was a kind of an interesting moment for me to realize that not everybody who asks me that question has an agenda. Some of the people who ask the question have just been conditioned in the same country with the same values for a lot longer than I have, and they haven't or never did. Maybe they never wanted to, or maybe they never had the opportunity to question some of those, do I want to call them values, customs, normalcies? And it was kind of funny. Brian and I laughed about that later, but I thought that was actually a great way to sort of be like, I don't want to talk about this. Let me put it back to you. No, I don't have kids. Do you? Okay. Is there anything else I want to say to you in this letter? Just like, I think there's a real difference between someone asking the question with an assumption. There's a difference between someone asking the question because there's no curiosity, and then if they follow up with like trying to prove to you why you should, nah. But if you ask a question where you genuinely are curious and you're open to whatever the person could possibly say, I think that that is good. And the more we can encourage each other in our friendships and our relationships to ask these open questions, the better. But there's also the truth that even if you do ask an open question, the person that you're asking it like might still not like it. They might still not like it. Sometimes people ask me open questions and I don't like it, and I'm not ready to, and I don't want to, and no, 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 no. But I still appreciate the open question more than the closed, judgmental one. Okay, we're going to get into, people sent in a bunch of questions to continue this conversation, so maybe we'll kind of pull out some more perspective and pull out some more ideas. But I think for now, that's how I'm kicking off the conversation with this letter. So now we will move on. This also, another thought that just came into my mind, but I want to say it's separate from this letter because I'm not saying it directed to the letter writer. But it's hard because even when other people are wrong, I do think a big part of life is learning how to deal with being triggered. A life where you're going through, where anything anybody says can offend you and send you into a spiral and make you angry or make you lash out, like that's fucking exhausting. And I think it's worthwhile spending time and putting in effort to try to identify what your triggers are and then learning how to deal with them. Because even if you're right, like even if the other person is saying something out of pocket, it serves you and your goals and your peace and your happiness to like let it go. To let it go, even when the things are as personal and serious as death, infertility, some of these like really deep things. It's kind of interesting to me how, there are so many assumptions we make about family in particular. And I think that motherhood and like becoming a parent, it's one of the big ones where people start to say the wrong thing. But part of me is like, people have been saying, think about how often the phrase like, what do your parents do for work comes up. And maybe I'm revealing some of my like class bias or like my maybe this gets into like some class stuff, but like that's a really common question that I've heard a million times. What do your parents do? What did your dad do? What did your dad do? Let's talk about the assumptions baked into that. One, that you have a dad. Two, that you are close with your dad. That your dad provides for you or was the provider in the family, that your dad has a job. Like there's just so many assumptions baked into that. Where do your parents live? You're assuming my parents are together. And these are questions that don't bother. Once you're asked an assumptive, and I feel like that's one of the words that I've messed up on the podcast before. When you're asked an assumptive question so many times over so many years, you become kind of numb to it. And I don't think that just becoming numb is like a good reason to, you should still process your feelings about it and like learn how to open up to people when they do make an assumption. But you also have to learn how to just be like, kind of laugh. Sometimes I like to think that you're a part of like a special club of people who know different. And sometimes it sucks to be a part of that club, but sometimes it's like, when people say something that they think you can relate to that you can't relate to, you kind of like can just laugh inside your head. And it's like a little party inside your head. And maybe that's a, weird coping mechanism, but it's true. And I like invite anybody to be a part of that club. People are gonna say stuff that's stupid and doesn't consider your experience, but ultimately, they might not know better. And do they have an excuse to not know better? Like, do they read books about other people's experiences? I don't know. I don't fucking know. I'm shocked sometimes by some people's inability to consider another person. Or just like, again, they're not always doing it maliciously, but it's confusing as a sensitive, and I still get it wrong, of course, all the time. But like as a sensitive person who goes out of her way to try to communicate things in an inclusive manner, and I'll still get it wrong, but like I do try to be inclusive and I try to realize that my experience is not the same as someone else's. So when I talk about things like family planning, I try to bring that. It's just sometimes mind-boggling to me that others don't, but they don't. And if I just regularly got worked up about that, I'd be worked up so much more than I already am. And I'm worked up a lot. Okay, let's get into the questions. Should I take another sip of espresso? I think I'm going to. Okay, I also just recently got this, my neighbor and I, quick little tangent. Francis's best friend is a dog named Cherry. Cherry's like a month older than Francis, and they're so cute and they play together so well. And it's just amazing having a neighbor with a dog where they play so well. My neighbor has two daughters, and I'm close with my neighbor who's an adult, but then I also get along with her two daughters. One's in middle school, the other's in high school, and the middle school daughter and I have gone to the mall together a couple of times to get boba tea, which has been such a treat for me. And she was talking about how much she loves boba one day, and I had never had boba, and anyway, I invited her and we went together. I love boba. And for those of you who know, I have some textural, like food texture issues. Like I can't do oatmeal. I wasn't sure how I'd feel about boba. I love the jelly texture. I'm absolutely obsessed. Yesterday or 2 days ago, when I went with her, I got the there was a rose, like jasmine basil tea. So very refreshing, very delicious. I'm glad it wasn't milky. I thought all boba had to be like a milky tea. No, refreshing, tart, fresh. And then at the bottom, those like little jellies. I could have a whole cup, like a whole bowl of just those little jelly bobas. Anyway, delicious. But we went to Sephora together and I got this Rhode strawberry peptide thing, and it just tastes so good. It just tastes so good that I'm enjoying having some good lip balms. It's like such a small little way to treat yourself, but tastes good. Tastes good. Not that you should be eating your lip balm. Okay, let's pull up the questions. That's just a regular deep breath, not an upset deep breath. Sometimes in real life, when I take a deep breath, people are like, "Are you good, Hayes?" I'm like, "Can a girl breathe?" All right, we're gonna start with this one. This person's question couldn't fit in the question box. They said, "It sounds awful, but I'm struggling to find the desire to retain friendships with people who lose their identities to motherhood." I have so many childhood friends who no longer have the same interests or hobbies, and with whom my conversations are only ever about their children and never about them, me, or the world. I feel like a bad person, but as a happily child-free woman, I don't know how to relate to someone whose sole focus is being a mom. Damn. Wow. Okay, we're coming out. We're coming in hot. Okay. I get it. I get it. And I want to, what's the goal here? Like, is the goal here? And I'm asking what the goal here is because I do think that when we are faced with a problem where we are having a judgment about someone else or a group of people that's making us not want to be with them anymore, there's a useful like check-in question of like, what's the goal? Is the goal to like work through this judgment so that I can have some relationship? Or is the goal to like let go of my shame that I have about the judgment and move on? What's the goal here? I think it's an acceptable outcome. If you feel like your friends with children, there's nothing you can relate to anymore and they're not making an effort, you don't want to make an effort. It sounds like you've come to the point where these friendships are going to fade out, and that can be sad. We can grieve that. But that could be an acceptable outcome, you know? But if you're curious about maintaining a friendship, then I can challenge you. I can challenge you a little bit, which I will do right now, and you can take it or leave it. And I don't think there's a right or wrong thing. I've heard this exact question from people in my life too, and I think there's just a lot of judgment when we say that so and so has lost their identity to motherhood. And the word lost their identity, I think, is tinged with criticism. And I also get it. And I think I get it. So I'm not judging you by saying this. Like, I understand where you're coming from. And it would be hard for me to have friendships with people who only talked about their kid and never wanted to talk about anything else. But saying that they've lost their identity, you're presuming that that's like a bad thing. And maybe it's a bad thing for your friendship, but it might not be a bad thing for them. And I feel like we sometimes have gone really far in like the moms lose themselves to their kids narrative, that it almost feels like kind of cruel. And I don't know if I want to use the word like misogynistic or sexist because I don't know if it applies in this situation, but it feels like a cultural push towards like hating moms who want to be moms and find joy in only doing that. I don't think I would find joy in doing that. And the friendships I have with mothers, they continue to have a range of interests. Many of those moms also have help, and that help, whether it's in a nanny or they're working part-time, like whatever it is, I think that help affords them the ability to like go out to dinner with me and have hobbies and go to workout classes and do those sorts of things. But I want to push back on that specifically. They've lost their identity to motherhood. I think there's a more compassionate way that we can talk about our friends who seem to have undergone an identity shift, because they have. And if we haven't had kids, we can't it is an identity shift. Like, your identity does change when you have a kid. For God's sake, my identity changed when I got a dog, and maybe my life will be perfectly happy just having lots of dogs. But I think your identity does change. And I think that like friendship is about accepting each other's identity changes. But again, it's a two-way street. Like, I completely hear you that if your friends only like want to talk about their kid and don't show any interest in anything else, they may have changed to a point that you can no longer relate to them. And that is sad. And I hear you that you don't want to continue those friendships. You don't have to. Or you can engage in those friendships in a more superficial way. But if you want to try to find a new type of friendship with them, I would start by just questioning that assumption. That phrase, they've lost their identities to motherhood, I've heard a lot. Now, it's hard because I also I do share that judgment. Like, I share your judgment. not necessarily about, I feel lucky that my close friends who, like I'm thinking about my one friend whose son's first birthday party that I went to this past weekend. And she's like such a wonderful example to me of being a new mom. And I love her kid. Like I love her son. And she knows that. I love when he comes with us to dinner. I love when I pick her up before she and I have a dinner date and I go inside. I love getting to see him. Like I love her kid. And in fairness, like I think she picks up that I love her kid and am interested in her kid, and maybe that like opens the door to like want to talk about more things because she knows I'm happy to talk about him. Like I find it weird when people don't want to know about Francis. Weird maybe isn't the right word, but like if I have a close friend and like you know that I got a dog 6 months ago and that she's like the love of my life, I find it weird if you don't, maybe again, there I go with weird. I find it odd, hurtful that you don't care to like know about my experience with her. Like I will remember that. Anyway, that's why tangent. This friend of mine is just such a great example of like loves her kid. We talk a lot about him and talk about her experiences with motherhood. I am genuinely curious. And we talk about other things too. I haven't yet really had an experience where like a friend of mine becomes a mom and we can't like engage about anything else. Maybe that's a testament to the types of friends I have. Maybe I don't know. I'm sure I will have that experience, but I've also, some friendships of mine have like wound down, and maybe those friendships that have wound down would be those types of mothers. And I just don't know because there were signs of it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever, where we weren't compatible. We didn't have the same interests. Like maybe this would have happened anyway. You're not a bad person, but I think you should ask yourself, what's the goal here? It's not nice to continue a relationship with someone if all you feel towards them is judgment and resentment, you know? Like, that's not cool. So I would question my judgment, and then wherever I land, I would either like let that friendship go or change my expectations of it, or try to be more curious about how their identity has changed instead of just thinking that their identity has been lost. But again, I fucking feel you, and it would piss me off if like the person never wanted to, the conversation was never reciprocal or the conversation never had flow. Maybe that's what it is. Like you want the conversation to have flow. And if someone's only talking about their kid and is not engaging with you, then it's not going to have flow, and then that's not going to be a fun friendship. Okay, more questions. When a friend invites me to something, how do I know if they're also inviting my kids? They send the invite to a group chat, but I'm the only one with kids. That's so like real and fucking awkward. I feel that too all the time. Like that's the type of, when I say I feel that too all the time, I don't have kids, but that's the kind of thing that would make me anxious. This doesn't directly answer the question, but if you're the one inviting, I think it's really nice to like be clear. Like, oh, I'm having all the girls over. Hayes, feel free to bring Francis, if Francis was the name of my baby. I guess you, person asking, do you need to bring your kid? Like, if none of your friends have kids and there's like a dinner, if you need to bring your kid for childcare reason or you're breastfeeding or whatever it is, then ask. And if you don't need to bring your kid, because someone's available to watch the kid or whatever, maybe try that. Like maybe be okay with that. Have a night with your friends without your child there. If you're going to ask, like I think that should be, especially if there's no other kids. I'm sure your friends would love to see your kid, but maybe this is like a adults dinner. Just ask. Send a one-off text being like, hey, I don't have childcare tonight. What do we think about me bringing Joey? Totally fine if not. It's funny. I assume that my friends will bring their kid. Most of my friends' kids are very, very, is that true? Is that true? I guess it depends on the context. If I had dinner with a friend and I picked them up, or we met at the restaurant and they had their kid there, I might be like, oh, interesting, but it wouldn't bother me. Like I wouldn't necessarily need the heads up, but that's just me. Like, I want you to come as you are, and I accept you as a mom now. But if it's like a large group dinner, it probably does change the vibe if there is a child there. So I would just ask. I would ask, and I would ask maybe privately for your own. I would maybe ask privately. I'm getting married later than my friends. How do I deal with them feeling less celebratory for me because they have kids now? I wonder if it could be helpful to like think about how you're defining celebratory. Because it's true that maybe celebration is going to look different at 30 and with kids than it did at 26 without kids. I think that's a reality. And that might still be hard and that might make you sad sometimes, especially if you went to weddings at 26 and they were like, everybody was like the perfect amount of drunk and like there was a specific vibe the next day when everybody could sit and chill and hang out and talk about what happened. And now it's a little bit different. I think it's okay and normal to feel sad about that. But I wonder if you could reframe what celebratory means. If you're associating celebratory with that type of kind of party vibe, I don't know if you are, maybe you could reframe it to like, now that my friends are older and more emotionally mature, they can actually like be supportive and engaged with my wedding and with the excitement of the day in like a deeper way than they could before. The truth also is that like maybe some of your friends aren't showing up for you because they are, quote, busier now. And it's not even just, quote, busier, like you are busier. Life does get busier, especially as you have more responsibilities in the form of work or children. It's hard. I will go back to what I always go back to with weddings, because there's always going to be something that you're going to be disappointed about with a wedding. And by that, when I say that, I mean, it's so easy to compare a wedding to someone else's wedding or another wedding you've been to. But at the end of the day, your wedding is about the person you're marrying. You're not getting married. You're not getting married to be celebrated by your friends. And I would really like kind of hearken on that. And I think I can sort of, even though I got married, I was one of my first friends to get married. I got married when I was 27, 2020. And even though I didn't have the people aren't there because of kids or they're not being celebratory because of kids, no one came to my wedding because it was COVID and I was supposed to have a big wedding and I didn't. So I do feel like I can speak a little bit on this from personal experience. I think I can speak to a lot of things that I might not have personal experience with because empathy and whatever. But I can speak to that. It is disappointing sometimes. Like I am familiar with the feeling of disappointment when I'm at a wedding and I'm with all of our friends and I'm like, wow, this is fucking awesome. And for a moment, I feel sad that I didn't get to have that experience. But then it passes because I remember that I have the greatest husband ever. And I love my marriage and I love my life. And that's much more important than like a wedding. Like it's just more important. And both of those things can exist at once. You can be disappointed that your friends aren't partying the way they were before or they weren't showing up before. But hey, you are getting married. You are the one who's in this marriage now. And that is about you and your partner. It's about you and your partner. And as disappointing as it might feel, and you should sit with that and hold it and identify it, like it's also an opportunity for you to be reminded about what matters and not like go completely crazy about the wedding. Because the more crazy you get about the wedding, I just think the more, I don't know, you lose. It's really easy to lose perspective with weddings. And you have an opportunity now to be reminded about what matters, which is you and your partner. Easier said than done, I know. Someone asked, should I be honest when my friends who want kids ask about why I'm hesitating? I ask myself that question a lot. Sometimes people will ask me a question and I sort of know the answer to, and as soon as they ask it, or maybe they're telling me a story and I know they're about to ask it, we're in a conversation. I mean, you guys know how conversations go. Sometimes someone's speaking and I have a moment where I check into myself and I say, what do I want to do here? Do I want to open up? Do I want to talk about the truth, or am I not quite ready to? And am I going to kind of go with my more surface level answer, which for me is still somewhat of a deep answer, but like that's not actually true. Sometimes I can be very surface level and I can answer things with, 3-word answers. I do that often actually when I don't want to be talking about something. But I have that moment where I check in and you know what? Both are okay. Both are okay. You don't always need to be honest. like, it's not honest or dishonest, right? There's a lot of gray in between. And being honest is hard. And it's not something you have to do all of the time, especially if you're not sure you're ready. You could practice, you can dip your toe into giving the really truthful answer with the right person. You can give a little bit and then you can always pull back. When you have to remember you're in control of your story. You're in control. No one's ever going to completely understand how you feel or what your perspective is because it's yours and it's not theirs. And you can share a little bit and then you can decide, you know what, this isn't feeling super great, or so I'm going to pull back a little bit. And maybe they'll say something and they sort of get it, but they sort of don't. Sometimes people will say something and it's like, not quite. You can make a decision where you say, oh, that's actually not really what I mean. It's more this, or not quite, or you can just say, yeah, exactly. Because sometimes it's okay to be misunderstood if you're not ready to really dive in yet. So there's no shoulds here. I do both regularly. And the more comfortable I get with my truth, the more open I am about giving the honest answer. So it sounds like you're on that journey too. How to not feel jealous when my friend has the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom and I don't. Oh, that's so real. That's so fucking real. Do you want to be a stay-at-home mom? One might assume that your answer is yes, because why would you be jealous? But maybe let's sit with that. Like, what assumptions about being a stay-at-home mom are you bringing to that thought process? Because maybe some of those assumptions are what's making you feel jealous. Maybe an assumption you're making is that it would be easier, it would be more fun, it would be more lavish, it would be more relaxing. And some of those things might be true, but some of them might not be true. And a way to potentially deal with some of that jealousy is being like, you know what? I don't know if being a stay-at-home mom would give me what I think it's going to give me. And it might. It is hard to be, I was going to say it's hard to be a working mother, but I don't know if that's true. I think every person, we all only have the reality that we're fucking able to have. So in some ways, it's not even useful to think about oh, what would it be like if I was a stay-at-home mom if you financially don't have that opportunity? But sometimes people are stay-at-home moms because financially it makes more sense. Like the nanny can be so expensive and your salary, the help could be so expensive and your salary might not be enough to pay that. So therefore, you have to be a stay-at-home mom. You and your family choose that. It's the choice that you have to make, a sacrifice you have to make, if you will, despite it not being what you want. So to go back to the beginning, I think challenge some of the assumptions you're making about what it means to be a stay-at-home mom. And think about how some of the stuff you want, some of the stuff that you think it might give you, think about how you could actually find that in your situation. Now, look, is this a stay-at-home mom who is rich and they're able to give their kid everything and go on vacations and buy the new bags? And I understand feeling jealous. I think let yourself feel jealous, and sometimes maybe that jealousy just needs to be spoken into the air or shared in private. I sometimes am I fucking wish, I wish that I wish that money was something I never thought about. Wouldn't that be nice? And when you know people for whom that's true, it's man, that fucking sucks. I feel jealous. And then, you know what? Would I? If money was never something that I worried about, then I wouldn't be who I am and I wouldn't have the perspective I do. And you know what? I'm doing just fine. I'm doing just fine. And it may always be in the back of my mind, and I can continue to live like that. I'm so blessed and so privileged and so lucky. I don't know. It's not such a clear answer for what to do, but that's what I'll say for that for now. If anybody else has thoughts on how to deal with that type of jealousy, would love to hear. Don't feel bad about yourself. Don't beat yourself up for it. Beat yourself up for it, or not beat yourself up for it, but, challenge yourself if the jealousy is making you act unkind or, be gossipy or judgmental or whatnot. But if the feeling is just there as a passing thought, let it speak it into existence, write it into your journal, and let it, pass on through. Let it go find somebody else. I'm in a position where I want a baby, but I'm waiting due to life situation. I don't want to be asked. I hear you. I hear you, love. I think that this episode hopefully was helpful for you to listen to. You, within your disposal, you always have the response of, this is just a hard conversation for me that I'm not ready to talk about right now. You can always say that. And people might ask you, and for your own nervous system, I want you to be prepared for that question. Because sometimes the question is an inviting one, is a curious one, is a compassionate one. And you don't need to take the invitation to engage in the conversation, but I don't want you to shut down when it's asked. And I know that's hard. I have my own versions of these questions that feel really, for a long time I shut down. Like I never want to talk about work. And with some people, I don't want to talk about work. Like for some people, I don't ever want to talk about it and they'll still ask me about it. And I have to have my own tools for how to deal with those conversations because I have to take the same advice that I'm giving, just learning how to deal with our fucking triggers, even though it's inconvenient and annoying. But what's more inconvenient? Having an emotional reaction that riles me up, having a disproportionate reaction that makes me feel uncentered and upsets me and makes me spiral. Like I'd rather have a way to deal with the annoying question than have to deal with my own emotional mishigas every time. You don't have to accept their invitation, but you do need to work on accepting that people are going to ask. And returning the question with questions to them is a great conversational skill to deflect. You can say, if someone says, "Oh, are you guys thinking about kids?" You can say, "We're thinking about it, but not yet. How about you? What's your journey been like?" Or you can change the conversation completely. "We're thinking about it, but not yet. We're thinking about it. We're thinking about it, but not yet." Practice saying it out loud and it will lose its emotional tenor. Okay. Someone said, "I have a fear of losing myself. I know I'd be a good mom, but would I be a happy one? How do I deal with this?" Oh, I know I'd be a good mom, but would I be a happy one? I have the same types of questions. I know I'd be a good mom, but would I be a happy one? I know I'd be a good mom too. But I'm also sure there are moments where I'd be a bad mom because no one is ever good or bad. I imagine that motherhood would be just like, in some ways, would be just like you now. And you now, I'm sure, is a person who is happy sometimes and who is sad sometimes and who makes bad choices sometimes, or who is selfish and who is stubborn and who is jealous and who is scared. You will bring those things with you to motherhood. And the presence of those, unsavory emotions, I don't think would make you an unhappy or a bad mom. But I think they're real questions that I don't know the answer to, and I wish I had the answer also. I wish I could hold my crystal ball and see into the future and be like, you're going to be a happy mom. You're going to be happy all the time, specifically as it relates to being a mother. And I don't know that. And that's where a lot of my fear comes from. And did you ask me a question there, or were you just sharing your feelings? Let's see. How do you deal with this? I'm dealing with it by getting more comfortable right now with the range of feelings that I experience and trying to feel less shame about the times when I feel sad or scared or hurt or grieving. Like for me personally, I feel whenever I have those big emotions, that's when I'm like, how could I ever have somebody else in my life when I'm capable of feeling sad? And my priority now is just working on some of the shame I feel around that stuff. So maybe that could be helpful for you. But I don't know. I don't know how to deal with it. But I'll say that I was scared of losing myself when I got my dog. It wasn't something I thought about before I got the dog, but in the first couple of weeks when Frances was here, she was so consuming that I was freaked out that I was going to lose myself. And I have only found myself in being Frances's mom. That dog right next to Brian, like one of the best things that has ever happened to me because of how it's made me more of myself and has helped me clarify my passions and like invest more time in the things that I truly care about and give less of a shit about the stuff I don't. So I know, to some people, a dog is not the same as a baby and they are two different species, but that's been such an incredible like eye opener for me as it relates to having a kid. Like Frances has taken up so much of my time and she is in some ways like the center of my like I fucking love her. I love that girl so much. And she hasn't, I don't know, she's made me more of myself, which will make sense to some people and not, but maybe that could be comforting to you. Okay, my voice is shaking a little bit. All right, next one. How to know if you don't want kids ever or you just don't want them currently, but open to later. So the way I have dealt with that is by really trying to be clear on like what the uncertainty is, which I've done with my therapist. And I do that with my therapist because my therapist is not, I don't think it has to be a therapist, but for me, my therapist is one of the people with whom I can have these types of open conversations. She's like, we have good conversations where she pushes me and challenges me, and I feel it is a place where I feel safe to have my big emotions. I also have some friends where I feel that way, but my therapist, like, the value of our working relationship, there's lots of value, but one of them is that she's a place where I can do that. So I've been exploring that a lot with her and trying to figure out what the uncertainty, where it comes from, has been really helpful for me in clarifying. Is it that I don't want them and I am firm that I don't want to be a mom? Or is it like other stuff? Because I wasn't sure at first. Like I wasn't sure what the uncertainty was. And I still am working on it. Please, like I still am working on it, but I'm comfortable enough with where I'm at to be able to say what I'm saying to you now. But I would just like write about it, journal about it, like write out all of the fears and see if you can pick up any patterns. Ask yourself questions like, what was your experience with your own parents? Were there things that you saw in your parents that make you worried about becoming? I'm sure the answer to all of us is yes. Like there are probably, even with the most perfect parents in the world, no such thing, but there are things where you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that. Maybe journal about some of those. What was your experience like as a kid? Like, did you have some hard things that you went through as a kid? Those are all reasons. Your life experience will play a role here. Who you were as a child and what you experienced as a child will likely play a role in your journey and decision to become a parent. Some people, it'll make them more, resolute that they want to. They know they want to. Other people, your childhood experience might make you feel more complicated. So that's what I would do. That's what I've done. Someone asked, how do I be gentle with myself in the interim? Saying you won't compare to your friends with kids is easy, but doing it is hard. I think I'm able to be gentle with myself because I surround myself with people, because I think it's because I have friends who are in similar boats to me, or who don't have kids, or who have kids but are very open about their feelings and also have kind of just the big complicated feelings in general. I find that community is what helps me be gentle with myself. Other people, I think, is all we have. And I don't know, leaning on others is how I'm gentle with myself, which I guess is, should we be able to be gentle with ourselves without the support of others? I'm not really sure. I think I am gentle. I know that this is true. I am gentle with myself through the support and unconditional love of other people. Their support of me and their openness and their sharing of their experiences is what gives me courage to be kind and gentle with myself in private. So I would lean on people. And if you don't have folks in your community now who don't have kids or who are, if everybody in your life is at the same stage and none of those people display like emotional curiosity, then I would take that as a time to start investing in trying to find some other types of friends. And, building deep friendships takes a long time, but start now. You always have to start somewhere, and you can start now. So that's one thing. I also think that being gentle with yourself is about talking to yourself with a really sweet, kind voice. I will often be found whispering to myself, it's okay. It's okay. You're doing great. You're doing the best you can. Everything's working out. You can take your time. There is no rush. I'm proud of you. Things are working out in exactly the order that they should. You've been dealing with some really important things. And what you've been working on and what you've been paying attention to really needed your time. It needed your time and attention. And if not now, it would have come up later. And now was the perfect time, which is why your attention has been there. And your attention can shift, and it is shifting. And I want you to stay open and curious to where it's going, but you are right on time. Everything is going well, and I love you. See, like I just needed that in that moment. So I just improv that. Talk to yourself like that. I'm fucking serious. I know it sounds silly and dumb. I'm like even a little like lightheaded after. Probably need more water. But talk to yourself like that. I think being gentle with yourself is like a practice. Like you have to practice it. You have to actually do it. And then you'll start reaping the benefits of feeling it, you know? I hope maybe that inspires someone to talk nicely to themselves. Okay, let me see what else there is. I did something that I haven't done in a while, which is that I posed this question on TikTok too, which I hadn't done. I've been trying to make some more videos again. And I posed the question that I usually post on Instagram to you guys on TikTok. I wanted to share this perspective. This isn't a question, but someone wrote something to consider. This experience being asked about whether you want to have kids or not, it can be really different for queer couples as opposed to straight ones. Sometimes it's assumed that you won't have kids if you're queer, and that can be just as frustrating. Also, the questions you end up fielding about the logistics of queer family building, etc. So this person said that was hard, and I followed up and was like, can you give me an example of what the best or most considerate way to ask the question is? And they wrote me a 3-part comment. Okay. For me, they said, and their name is Knit. Should I say it out loud? It's a cute name and it's public here, so I don't think they'll mind. Knit Queries, which is such a cute username. I'm wondering if you like knitting. Yep, clicked your page and you make some fabulous knits. Fabulous knits. Okay. They wrote, for me, the ideal is just a direct, do you think there are kids in your future? Oh, I love that question. Do you think there are kids in your future? I think that would be great. The key point for my wife and me is that the question allows us to share as much as we're comfortable with. We're parents now, but it took a while. And it was not a great experience for me as a fairly private person to have people feel like they could ask questions about donors, who would carry the baby, etc. Another thing to consider is once you have a kiddo as a queer parent, the invasive questions don't stop. Earlier this week, I had an acquaintance ask me if my wife was upset that our kid looks just like me. Wild behavior, honestly. I've also been asked, who's the real mom? You've got to be fucking kidding me. I've also been asked, who's the real mom? And also been told by daycare, well, you're really more like a dad than a mom. This is what I mean, where some people, I'm just like flabbergasted by what people say. So basically, they said, ask in an open-ended way, and don't ask about genetics or logistics unless the potential parent brings it up themselves. And don't assume that queer couples don't want kids as much or as commonly as cis-het couples. Such a great perspective. The questions about donors and all of those, I can totally see how that's invasive. I can understand being like curious to want to know how it works if you don't know, but asking the question as, do you think there are kids in your future? And then letting the person you're speaking with share what they want to share, like that's the way to do it. So I'm so glad that this person chimed in there. Let's see. Did anyone else say anything here? I did not make this video. I made the video asking for opinions, but I didn't really frame it in the best way to actually get people's questions. So the comment section, there's 68 comments now, more just people sharing their opinions, which is great. But I'm reading now to see if anybody had any questions for me. Someone wrote, it's not invasive, the question, but if I say no or I'm not sure, there's always follow-up questions. That's understandable, but they never seem satisfied with my response. Each answer seems to lead people, typically older women who want to give advice, to 5 more questions, pressing the subject in an uncomfortable manner. Yeah, I agree. Like, it's often not the first question that's upsetting, but it's when people try to like poke a hole in your argument or like convince you why you should change your mind or why you should be ready, that's where it gets inconsiderate. I totally agree. Someone wrote, the question doesn't bother me, but this type of comment does. Like, when you have kids, you'll XYZ. When you have kids, you'll understand. Yeah, I find that really obnoxious as well. When people are not only assuming that you'll have kids, but then are assuming how you're going to feel when you do, and specifically how you'll feel more like them. Yeah, there's not so many questions here again because I did not phrase my video correctly, but there are a lot of really interesting opinions and perspectives. So if you want to see more people's thoughts on this, go ahead to that video. I posted it a few hours ago and there's 68 comments. So I'm sure there'll be more by the time this goes live tomorrow. And I think that is it. I'll check one more time. Okay? Just one more. I should have posted this. I like to post these question boxes like the day before so that I give people 24 hours, but didn't do that. Didn't do that today. Okay, what can I tell you? Nope. All right. I think that's it for now. I love you all. It's good to be back home. I had recorded the last couple episodes in advance because I was traveling about a week ago and didn't want to bring my podcast equipment. And it feels good to be recording this like live again, going live tomorrow. I appreciate you all so very much. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Excited to keep this conversation going with you and with each other. If you have your experiences you want to share, I'd love to hear them. Remember that this is like the first part of the conversation. And in the same way, like imagine if you were having coffee with someone. We don't have the benefit of getting to have a back and forth with each other in real time, but I try to think about this as that type of conversation. So I said what I said at coffee, and now I want to hear what you have to say. And these thoughts are malleable and flexible, and I will probably think of more things I want to say tomorrow. And now I'm doing this caveat thing, but I want this community to be a place of actual conversation, the way that you would have a conversation with a trusted and loving friend. And maybe that's asking for too much, but it's what I want and it's what I want to create and what I'm trying to create at least. I love you all. If you like this episode, we have new episodes every Tuesday. Send it to a friend, leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and I'll see you next week. Bye.